Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca Wang, a freshman at Stanford. Welcome to the first episode of From the Cow Train, a series that features early stage startups and founders. Today, we're meeting Emilė Radytė, the founder of Samphire Neuroscience, which aims to solve PMS with neurotechnology. Samphire Neuroscience is a UK-based medtech and femtech startup. Its main product is Nettle, a non-invasive neuromodulation wearable device that looks like a headband and delivers small electrical pulses to the brain for women experiencing pain or mood disorders during menstruation. Essentially, Nettle reprograms how your brain perceives pain and mood symptoms. So I'm so excited to introduce Em. She's born and raised from Lithuania, came to the US to study neuroscience and social anthropology at Harvard, and later to the UK to complete a master's and doctorate in neuroscience and neurobiology. This year, Em and her co-founder raised 2.3 million in their pre-seed round. So today, we asked Em about her biggest insights in building in healthcare and hottest takes about the future of femtech. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. So glad we're able to catch you while you're in San Francisco. So to dive right in, at the start of 2024, Andreessen Horowitz made a bold claim that a consumer health tech company will become the biggest company in the world. For our listeners, could you set the stage on where we are now in terms of women's health for that prediction?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you look over the last 3 years in women's healthcare, it has changed a lot. Those were the first 3 years where we started seeing unicorns coming up in women's health, such as Maven or Flow Health more recently in 2024. And we know that all of these companies are essentially focused on making women's healthcare more accessible. So whether that would be essentially giving women access to different platforms like Maven does and different professionals, or whether that be things like Flow Health, so helping essentially women understand their symptoms a little bit better and kind of how they impact their everyday health. But what I think they get right is that clearly once you understand your symptoms well and you're able to access clinicians, you want treatments, you definitely want interventions. So I think over the last 3 years, we've seen a lot more interventions and interest in therapeutics in women's health spaces, not only diagnostics. And if I were to kind of make my own bold claim, I would say that if there is going to be a consumer health company, which there certainly will be in women's health, taking it all over, it one has to be a therapeutic that actually is able to improve some aspect of women's health. And because each of the women's health markets is so big in and of itself, like whether that be endometriosis, uterine cancer, or whatever it may be, all of these are multi-billion-dollar businesses in the making and opportunities. And so I think that will be somewhere in the therapeutic space, somewhere in the solution space, and something that can scale easily, is accessible, simple, and understandable for the many women across the world.
I love that you mentioned that there was a recent rise in the past 3 years in femtech startups. We talked about this earlier when we first met, and I found out it was like not until 1993 that women started being included in clinical research trials for new medications. And this really means until recently, there's like a huge gap in knowledge of female physiology and the effects of medications in the female body. So could you share on what led you to building Nettle and why now 2024 is the best time to build Sapphire Neuroscience?
Absolutely. I will just ask every woman listening to this to step away and think of your last medical appointment and now reflect on whether you were asked which phase of the menstrual cycle you're in, whether you are on hormonal contraception or not. That's actually part of the data we have the opportunity of collecting so often with women and still aren't. So even though, as you said, we only recently started including women in clinical trials, we still don't do our due diligence of understanding all of the factors that impact women's health and well-being, and instead limit them on asking, how did you sleep? So the circadian rhythm, but including all of the other natural rhythms that women engage with, whether that be the menstrual rhythm, the gestational rhythm around pregnancy or menopause, which are all obviously going to interact with the body. And so the reason I think, and we started Samphire in 2021 when that wave was still beginning, and we called ourselves a market making business. So we deal in the space of PMS and menstrual pain initially, but looking to grow into other spaces of women's health as well. And the opportunity that we saw there is that there's just a huge gap. There are so many women, they're aware of the problem. Just think of conversations you've had with your friends, and you always know that there's a problem in the way that these symptoms, one, are real, and two, have no really good solutions. So we know there was a little a big market there. And two is we knew that women are keen and good adopters of early technologies. So if you look at all the women walking around with IUDs, implants, women actually are already very comfortable intervening with their bodies in order to feel better. And I think that's kind of an unseen opportunity there as well. So the reason I think 2024 is the year to grow like consumer neurotechnology for women's health, which is what Samphire does, is because women are finally aware of their bodies and willing to make a difference for it, so invest for it. And I think it's the first year that clinicians are realizing that women will not settle for, just take the pill and move on with your life, but are actually asking for evidence, proof, and solutions that work.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but most people would say that healthcare is an extremely intimidating and regulated industry. Especially for our listeners interested or working in the space, what are some issues you overcame or are currently facing?
I would say those who say that healthcare is an incredibly regulated and complex industry, they're absolutely right. It is, but it is also one of the biggest moats you can have. In the end, if you have a solution that actually works, makes a difference, is cleared by authorities, and able to make a difference in people's lives, there are a few other things that I think could make a larger impact on women's health in general. So I would say, don't be intimidated by the path to get there. Be intimidated by the fact that we still haven't solved so many of the problems in the women's health space. I think we got very lucky many times in our journey. So my background is as an academic neuroscientist and also moving into this field of both women's health and kind of more from commercial product development. And one of the things that we overcame is really focusing on our users. So knowing what do women need? Because I think a lot of scientists and technical people and clinicians who come to these spaces want to make the most complex, fascinating product, as opposed to making a product that really works and addresses the pain points. So we didn't focus on making the most complex neurotechnology product with lots of buttons and lots of settings. We wanted it to be pretty with one button and effective, most importantly, and with very few side effects. And of course, that required compromising on, a lot of like complexity that we could have derived, but we really focus on what users ultimately needed, which is something as simple as taking a pill, but something that stimulates their brain. So I think one big focus for making that path easier was being very clear on what our purpose was, which was to serve our users. Two is we started engaging with partners and especially clinical partners and research partners very early on in our journey. We started speaking to people who had expertise on how to lead clinical trials and could help us get the clinical evidence we needed. And then finally, we really put kind of medical values front and center to our company. Because if you're trying to build a product in healthcare and then think of regulation or of clinical evidence as an afterthought, I think you'll always have a worse product than if you embed it in your practices every day. Because then, you don't do random things right, left, and center, but you need to be focused and clear why you're doing everything that you're doing, because you'll need to not only document, but be able to defend every single decision you've made. So I think it has made us, we're a 3-year-old company, but I think we have the maturity of a 10-year-old company, lots of quality management procedures, but that's what we expect from a legal manufacturer of medical devices. So I think it made us grow very quickly.
Were there any surprises you had when you interacted for regulation approval from bodies in the UK and the US?
Yeah, I think in the UK and Europe, I was a little bit surprised that they still didn't have very strong theses on women's health and how they want to regulate it. So it felt like oftentimes we were educating them not only about our technology and showing all of the evidence, but also about the state of the art in women's health. And I think that's a direct consequence of there just not being many devices and innovations in that space, especially on the therapeutic space. So that was one big learning. In the US, we had a similar interaction, just understanding that a lot of these bodies have seen what they have seen, which is oftentimes diagnostics or very low interventions or very intensive interventions, things like tools for hysterectomies and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, didn't anticipate the amount of education we needed to do with regulatory bodies. But then two, I had actually very positive interactions always with the US FDA in terms of their open-mindedness. Like I think they went above and beyond to understand essentially the technological basis, the clinical basis of what we were doing and how we were thinking about innovation and suggesting new approaches there. So I think it really challenged my perceptions that, the regulators are someone against you and instead seeing them as partners to work with. And now moving forward, that's kind of how we work together. Like we have this amazing technology we want to make accessible. Help us by telling us what do you need to see from us, what type of evidence do you need, and how can we get it to you in the best way possible.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great that you formed so many relationships with the government and also clinics. You've raised 2.3 million in pre-seed, completed clinical trials, and already began traction with your first release of Nettle sold out. What would you say has best led to your success so far?
Our team. I think we've had an absolutely brilliant team who really believed in the product from day one. We are, a market making technology, which means we're new in a lot of the markets we deal with. And so I'm really grateful for everyone who kind of saw the vision and saw the mission behind it and were willing to put in so many hours and continue to as well. So team above and beyond. And then secondly, like I think our investors and our backers who both shared that belief, but were also able to put their money where their, kind of word was at, but also introduce us to the people we needed to speak to, provide us with some invaluable advice or perspectives that could help us steer us in the right direction. And I think it cannot be said enough that it's only the right people can build the right companies. And I'm very grateful for the people I came across in this journey.
So, looking ahead, like 10 years from now, where do you see Samphire Neuroscience and what kind of impact do you hope it will have?
I think Samphire's thing that we get really right is that women don't want to be treated as, you're a woman on periods, you're a woman who's trying to get pregnant, you're a woman who's going through menopause. Like, you're still the same woman. You're the same woman who's making decisions about her fertility and the same woman who's going to be going through menopause. So I really see Samphire in 10 years' time being this continuous health company that essentially allows you to track your symptoms, whatever phase and stage of your life it's associated with throughout your lifetime. And as we see that there's an opportunity for us to improve some of those symptoms, like at the moment, if you have PMS and menstrual pain, we can recommend you go straight to Nettle, and that's going to be the state of the art solution for your symptoms. But in the future, we plan to have products in the menopause space, in the postpartum health space, in the chronic pain space that disproportionately impacts women. And the idea would be that as we learn more about your symptoms, we're able to give you the solution you need. And we don't need to necessarily focus on what stage of your reproductive life you are, because our lives are much more fluid than a lot of kind of fertility companies or menopause companies may make you believe.
Mhm. So, right now, I know that Nettle is kind of like a wearable headband. 10 years down the line, do you also see that evolving to other pieces of wearable technology?
Yeah, so I see Nettle will always remain a headband for PMS and menstrual pain. I mean, our technology is state of the art, it's effective, it works, and I think it only needs to scale and reach as many women as possible in need. But we do plan to have other products. We have a couple of MVPs already developed with university partners for other areas of application. And I think we'll always continue focusing on chronic health, and chronic health issues disproportionately impact women. So to me, a lot of chronic health issues is pretty much the same as women's health issues as well. So we have some exciting things in store. And I do think that we'll have a suite of different wearable and, most importantly, medical grade products to offer women the best option that they can have on the market.
So, we'll love to wrap things up with a little round of rapid fire. To kick things off, first, do you see anything overrated or underrated in FemTech?
I think diagnostics are overrated, therapeutics are underrated.
A founder or company you're excited about?
Ooh, OptoBio and Elise Jenkins. So they do essentially invasive neurotechnology for cancer monitoring and treatment.
Where can folks go to learn more about you and the incredible work you're doing?
The best place to reach me is on LinkedIn or on my Instagram, which you can find by just searching my name. You can also see all of our newsletters on our mailing list, which is samphireneuro.com. And if you're ready to kind of start tracking your own symptoms, you can also download our app called just Samphire online and just better understand what your symptom profile looks like.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.